While I was an active duty Marine, I amassed a 7-figure net worth by investing in this one asset class. And I'll describe all of the details, all of its characteristics, and then how to actually find ones for yourself so that you can invest and you can acquire a 7-figure net worth well before it's time to like retire the traditional way when you're 59 and a half or 65. And here's the craziest part. I actually went against what most of my senior enlisted and officers would ever tell me about finances. In fact, like here's one example. I remember being in a helicopter in flight school with a Navy commander, and I was like, hey, you must have all your stuff together. We were on a very boring leg of the flight, and I was like, sir, what do you recommend I do financially so that I'm successful while in the military financially? And he told me, don't ask me that question because I have made way too many mistakes and I don't know what I'm doing with money. And that blew my mind. I was like, wait a second. This person in the military, somebody I'm like looking up to, I feel like they should have their stuff together, not only as a pilot, but also in life outside of being a pilot. Because let's be honest, something I was realizing then is being in the military isn't everything life is about, right? There's more to life, of course. We're gonna take the uniform off someday. So I was like, I wanna figure out how to make a lot of money. And so I wanted to keep asking questions. And I got all sorts of advice and all sorts of stuff, but I really went my own route that was, I think, at the time especially, very peculiar and extraordinary, maybe different than most military do. And so here's the things I focused on when I was investing, and I'll explain it all right now. There's 6 elements to the best investment possible. I'll break those down, then I'll help you find these types of investments, how to actually calculate to see if they're going to bring you the returns that you're hoping for. So without further ado, this is how to become rich in the military, during, after, whatever, whether you're active duty reservist, military spouse, it doesn't matter. This video is for you if you want to get rich. All right, here we go. Okay, so the first thing that you want to look out for when you're making an investment is if you can use leverage. Now, leverage means most of the time is that you're going to use debt. Now, the way I look at it is, could you imagine buying Tesla stock and saying, hey, I only have $100, but being able to buy $500 worth of Tesla stock? In the long run, you're probably fairly certain that Tesla's going to do great, and you would rather own $500 worth of Tesla stock, even though you only have $100, and be able to make the returns off of a full $500 as if you actually owned every dollar of that investment chunk, right? And so that's what I'm talking about, is you want to be able to leverage bank money, investor money, other kind of money, other people's money was what we call it, OPM, to be able to acquire larger investment vehicles than you could with the dollars you have in your pocket. Leverage is basically how you multiply your outputs based off of your inputs. You can leverage people, you can leverage systems to multiply how effective you are. And when you can use other people's money, banks and investors and so forth, that's how you can buy larger investment vehicles. So this is the first thing you should look out for when you're deciding on whether an investment is worth it in terms of like wanting to get to the millionaire status much sooner. Now, the second thing is called principal paydown. And this is incredibly important because you just heard me say that you might need to get a lot of debt to acquire large investment vehicles that you can then benefit from all of the appreciation, not just your small chunk. Well, that's true, but it also is important that you're able to find these vehicles where other people are not only loaning you money or investing with you to acquire that thing, but there's also a whole other group, a whole other element to this that is paying off the loan for you, not you. So in my case, I don't pay off these loans myself. I have other people pay off these loans. And that's a part of how these investments, these businesses work. And that's what you should look out for. And so principal pay down is essentially paying down the principal loan amount. It's kind of like a reverse savings account. And the cool thing is your name is on this loan or whatever it is. And as it gets paid down, that counts towards your net worth. And that's how you become wealthier in your sleep, when other people are paying this down for you. The only analogy I can make is, can you imagine having a TSP and have somebody else contribute to it? I'm not even talking about the matching. I'm saying like legit, somebody else is contributing to your TSP. This is a similar thing. All right, now number 3 is cash flow. This is the most important metric when determining whether you want to invest it. I'm going to be talking about how to calculate cash flow so you know if you're investing smartly here in just a second after I'm done with these 6 profit centers. But essentially, when you invest in something, the way I look at it is I do not want to wait until I'm 59 and a half, 65, 67, whatever the typical retirement age is. I want to start feeling the benefit of the investment immediately. I want to start making more cash flow, more income. I mean, could you imagine having multiple streams of income coming in residually? Not necessarily passively. You still have to work to create these assets, to invest in these things, but have it coming in on top of maybe your military paycheck or your W-2 paycheck after the military, whatever the case may be. Well, that's what cash flow is. And you have to be very smart in calculating it, although it's not that complicated. I'll go over that here in a little bit. And you also have to you basically have to make that the number one thing you focus on when determining. So like all the other things I'm talking about are great, but cash flow is that's like the tip of the iceberg. If that's good, everything else is going to work out just fine. These are all just basically gravy on top, cherry on top, if you will. But cash flow is the guiding light. Now, if you're wondering, okay, how do I calculate this stuff? Like I said, I'm going to go over it, but if you want more help, we have an entire mentorship program, which is in the links. You can come and register. It's a military community that's investment minded. So definitely check that out, but I'm going to keep going. So number 4 is appreciation. You obviously want the investment to grow in value over time. I'm not revealing any new stuff for you here. That should be obvious, but what's not so obvious is how to pick something that's going to appreciate over the long run, almost basically guaranteed, right? Something that might have a dip here and there, but that over the long run will appreciate. So that's another thing you want to look out for when determining whether to invest in a particular investment or when to pick out where you want it to be physically, all that kind of stuff. You have to think about the long-term appreciation. Number 5. Okay. I love this one. And this is actually what got me into this stuff is tax benefits. I know that doesn't sound sexy, but here's how it works. Basically, when you start making a lot of cash flow and appreciation and all this kind of stuff, eventually there are going to be taxable events and you're going to have to pay money for the money you're making. And the worst thing about making money is having to pay taxes. Let's be honest. I mean, the US government knew this a long time ago. That's why they structured the tax code that way. It's a list of incentives on how to not pay taxes. It's not a book about this is how you're going to pay taxes. It's about how to not pay taxes because they realize that people actually would rather make less money than pay money back after they make it. That's the crazy social engineering thing that a lot of countries have realized and why they structured the tax codes the way they did. And with this particular investment vehicle, you're able to get the best tax benefits, period, end of story, of anything else written in the tax code. And I'll talk about that here in just a second. But without further ado, here is Profit Center number 6. And this one is crazy because it basically beats the government's game. And what I'm talking about is inflation. Look, the government basically has to inflate money. There's a lot of things that are at play with inflation. I'm not going to get into macroeconomics, but the reality is that our government does print more money than goods and services are created. And so what happens is an imbalance where the dollar starts losing its value over time. We hope that it's only 2 or 3% every year, but sometimes, as you remember, what was it in 2022, 2023, inflation went crazy, right? It hit almost double digits, if I'm not mistaken. And so it was, I remember hearing 9%, 9.5%. It was crazy. And what you want to do is you want to be able to beat that game. You want to be outside of the system. So the best investments are those that beat inflation. And what I'm getting at is basically something that its value is independent of the value of a dollar. So that if the dollar loses its value, you're just going to have to then find more dollars to acquire these. Or in our case, the value of the investment vehicle, even if it stays the same, its price, in dollars, is going to go up because people will need more dollar bills who have lost their value to acquire these. It's basically baked in appreciation, and that's what's so incredible. Not to mention the services you offer will also have to increase in price because as you operate these investments, it'll have to go up in price because you need to match inflation, and so you're going to have it generate more cash flow as time goes by. So it really beats inflation. It hedges against inflation in 2 different ways. All right, without further ado, here is what the investment is. I bet a lot of you have probably already guessed what it is. I'm talking about real estate. Yes, owning a property gets you all 6 of those profit centers. You're able to leverage the bank's money actually very easily, especially with the VA loan. If you're, E5 or you're getting BAH, you're an officer, you're able to acquire a home with $0 out of pocket, sometimes getting cash back at the closing table. and acquire these, and you can get up to 4 units. It's ridiculous. And house hack, and not even have to pay for them while you're in it. If you're interested in house hacking, look at the links below too. But you're able to do that with bank's money. Then you're able to rent it out as a rental and have other people pay off that property for you. Remember, principal pay down. And then you're able to make money on top of what it costs you. So you can actually make more rent, which we're going to get into here in a second, than all of the expenses. And then it's going to appreciate over time. I mean, real estate is historically the most stable appreciating asset possible. And then you're going to beat inflation, and you're going to get massive tax benefits on the money you're making from that property. So in my opinion, this is the best investment in all of America. Now, sure, we could have a lucky strike, invest in some kind of penny stock, or, invest in Apple 15 years ago and just never sell and ride that out. Sure, those things can happen. Or Nvidia, right? Like that thing's going crazy. But with real estate, it is the common person's way to wealth. I was able to do it as an immigrant with a family who did not understand debt. And so I'm telling you, if you want to learn how I did this, listen up for a little bit longer, because we're going to get into the analysis of this. When you're trying to decide whether you want to buy a home that's going to turn into a rental later, or if you want to buy a rental, out of state, maybe even away from where you're stationed, which I have done. I mean, there's properties I've never even seen that I own. Well, then the way to do that is through a simple calculation. It's called PITI PMMV. Okay, so if you're ever at a cocktail party, you want to sound cool, and you tell people you're a real estate investor, which I think you should because it helps build up that identity, is you can tell them, they'll be like, well, what does that mean? Principal, interest, taxes, insurance, property management, maintenance, and vacancies, and sometimes reserves. Say that 5 times fast, okay? PITI PMMV, essentially all it means is when you have a rental property and it's generating rental income because of the tenant in there, you then subtract these things. So let's say the rent is $2,000, then you're subtracting principal and interest, right? That's the loan, the principal amount, the amount you're actually paying off on the loan that's making you wealthier in your sleep. Then the interest, which you have to owe the bank for giving you that loan. And then taxes and insurance. You have to pay property taxes and you have to pay for insurance, absolutely. Then there's property management. You can manage yourself, but if you want it to be more hands-off and passive so that it's easier to acquire more of these while you're still active duty or afterwards, then I highly recommend having a professional property manager. And then maintenance, which includes like ongoing and deferred maintenance, but also capital expenditures like improvements to the property. And then vacancies, which vacancies you're probably like, why would I calculate vacancies every month? I'm probably only going to have, a vacancy for about 2 weeks when I turn over my tenants. That's true. But what you want to do is you want to calculate what that losses for like the 2 weeks or a month where the property is vacant, and then spread it out over the 12 months so that on average how much you have to account for when that vacancy happens every single month. So you don't pocket that and spend that money, but that you have that saved up for when a vacancy happens. It's basically annualizing that expense is what it's called. So that's how you discover if this is a good investment, is you take the rent, subtract all those numbers, and if you still have money left over, it's going to make you cash flow every single month. Now, let me say one more thing. It's also very important to remember that this leverage that you're taking from the bank is something that I told you earlier is getting paid off, not by you, but by the tenant. You're literally becoming wealthier in your sleep because they're paying you the rent that then pays off that loan. And that is basically like a TSP. Somebody's basically paying off a reverse savings account in your name. And that's how it's how you compound wealth. Not to mention my favorite part, and the reason why I've been able to continue traveling and having fun with my family, is because of the cash flow. We make income every single month from our rentals. Like there's one property I have right now. This is a large multifamily apartment complex that I bought with my parents early on. It now makes me $3,500 every single month, and it makes my parents $7,000 every single month. And so this stuff is powerful. And if you're interested in learning more, or you want to get your first home with a VA loan, I got a bunch of links down below, but I highly recommend that you look into this one way or another. After this video, actually intentionally set out to think about real estate. Read our book, Military House Hacking. You can Google it. Or Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Absolutely read both of those books. This will transform your military career, your financial situation with your life, in your family, forever. Anyway, Mark Yancich from Active Duty Passive Income is out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later.